Hello and welcome to Inside Music Curation. We're the team at Feed Media Group. I'm joined here by my esteemed colleagues, the Feed FM Music Curation team, Mike, Claire, and Stens. My name is Melissa. I'm in marketing here at Feed Media Group. And today on this episode of Inside Music Curation, we're going to talk about Ariana Grande, who just released a new album. She's getting ready to release a new film starring in Wicked. So lots of new things going on for Ariana, ready to dive in. Who wants to start? Who wants to kick us off talking about excitement around the new Ariana Grande album, perhaps?
I can, since this was kind of my idea of a good artist for us to highlight. She's now solidly like 10 years into a music career, having released some pretty now acclaimed albums and, made the transition from Nickelodeon star to a mainstream pop star. Has been through a lot in that time. And I think, we see a lot of that reflected in her music. For our purposes, as a B2B streaming platform with a lot of fitness clients, we definitely program a lot of her upbeat music.
And what do you guys think of the music on this new album? Is it upbeat? Is it fitting that bill, or where does it fit into the mix?
There's a couple of jams on there, Yes, and I think Bye will be a great one to use. Imperfect for You, maybe. A lot of it's, sort of mid-tempo R&B, which is also fine. There are a lot of uses for stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I think, we came into this really as, fitness curators first, maybe, and music lovers secondly. And so, we kind of scrutinized it a little bit for utility, if you will. And there definitely are some songs in there that I'm really excited about, using in our customer stations, including the ones Mike highlighted. And also what Mike or Claire might mention is she already has some really nice remixes, which also is always nice for fitness. Purely as just a music listener, I've become a fan of Ariana Grande through the work I do here at Feed. So, I've been here for almost 8 years now. So my time with the company is really coincided with her rise to fame, and going from someone that would just sometimes have a few songs that I would kind of plop into stations and whatnot, to becoming an artist that I really actively look out for, and I'm excited to listen to her music, both because it works really well from a curation standpoint, and also because as a classically trained musician, I just really have a tremendous respect for her artistry and her voice. She's got an amazing range. Obviously, I'm really impressed with her pitch and her fluidity. And there's an effortlessness to the way that she sings. There's an ease to the way that she sings that belies the effort and the mechanics underneath it, which to me is almost operatic in nature. But she doesn't flaunt that. She does it in the context of pop with incredible integrity. And so when I threw on the album, it was really like, what's going on here with her musically, right? And I can just really, it's a joy to listen to her sing. And so even the songs on here that aren't necessarily useful for curation, I can really appreciate, and I can appreciate the album that she's put together, which I know we're going to get into more as a team. What's going on with Miss Grande?
And specifically to curate for fitness, right? We do a lot of fitness curation and a lot of upbeat. There's, as Mike said, there's definitely a time and a place for the R&B. But I would say, I had a similar reaction in that effortlessness. It was just very easy to listen to, and she made it sound very, very effortless to, stroll through these stories and these songs that she put together.
Yeah, I think this album also sort of marks a more like definitive like departure from more like the generic sort of pop sensibilities in that way. I think like a lot of the lyrics are, she continues, I think, to get more and more personal with that. And, is not sort of shying away from both like the songwriting and production elements and having and contributing to both of those. And I think in a way that appears authentic. And I think in like the realm of the pop conversation, there's always going to be certain elements that are manufactured and whatnot. But I think that's part of her sort of popularity, is the authentic way she like presents her music. And interestingly, I sort of like see a sort of more direct focus on storytelling on this album that sort of reminds me, or not reminds me, but like makes me think of like she's sort of making this album while she's filming the movie for Wicked. And so there sort of is a differentiating element of like, these songs are storytelling in that they're like moving the plot forward in the way that like musical songs do that as well. So I think I know like she's been sort of also where she got her start, even as a much younger person. I know she did some Broadway stuff before then. So it's sort of interesting to see that effect on it as well, I think.
I think two things that you touched on. One is, this authentic, and from what I understand from the interviews is this was a bit of a more spontaneous album, right? She was in the process of filming Wicked, strike happens, has some extra time, goes into the studio and puts together this album. So I think that there's, as a musician, there's something that you can only really capture when it's fresh, right? And I think in pop music, sometimes that gets lost in the process and things take longer than usual. So there's a freshness there that you get when you have a more spontaneous album to come out. And I think, it seems like there's a few nods to acting, like right within, I forget which song, you play your part and I'll play mine. So it's interesting to see what happens when an album comes out mid acting project.
To that, one of the things that I realized as I was listening through the album for the first time is like, wow, her enunciation is markedly more clear on this album than it ever has been before. That's always been my thing about her. Like I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth, So like this album, it's like, oh wow, maybe she did take a few lessons from the folks she's working on Wicked with from.
Yeah, that Break Free with Zed is one of those examples. I think that was on like a misheard lyrics thing, and it's like, now that I become who I really are, it sounds like are, but it's supposed to be am. Anyways, but yeah, it's definitely a good example. And I think some of her earlier stuff too, she had a lot more sort of like hip hop collaborators and hip hop production. And I do think this album, like undercurrent, like primarily R&B, but like has more sort of dance woven through in a way that sort of differentiates it's from previous albums.
Yeah, one thing, continuing the observation about dance, right? And the dance encompasses stuff like, it's interesting. I love that song Imperfect for You, Mike. I respectfully question how much use we'll get for that in a fitness context because it's in triple meter. And I think one of the things about her that has been really fun to go back through her catalog is that she's always had these triple meter songs that are in kind of like a like almost like a doo-wop older style, right? Like she's carrying forward these elements of older pop songs. And certainly like there's tons of stuff on the album that are like 4 on the Floor, clearly like 4/4 time tracks, you know what I mean? But I love that she throws in these mixed meter tracks and stuff that are different. Sorry, my point about the dance being, and we've talked about this a lot, Claire actually coined a term that we all love within our curation team of like, have we achieved peak disco? Because for the last few years, there's been a huge migration from pop stars, from Lady Gaga to Dua Lipa and others, into much more disco, like late 70s, early 80s style. And that's continuing on this in a way, and I think still authentically, like she's not just grabbing someone's coattails. But what I heard, which is interesting, and I'm a child of the 80s, so I'm loving the like Jackson references to Michael and Janet. I'm hearing both of these, and maybe some oh my gosh, Quincy Jones in there too. But I'm loving that this album sounds, production wise, it's got some of that soft, glossy vocal qualities to it, from the way that the music was produced in the early 80s, not just like the musical elements, whereas like Future Nostalgia of Dua Lipa, you can hear a ton of early 80s style in it, but it's in a production style of currently. Whereas this has kind of like a softer vibe to it that is kind of a nice nostalgic vibe for me that was nice, and I think also is distinct and different from her older music, which is really produced in a very of the moment style, right? Much more so of like with the trap hip hop beats and with like really crisp, sharp production. So that's another thing that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of a departure even just from the like pop diva sensibilities. Like there aren't a ton of, I mean, she has the range, we all know she does, that she can do those big runs. But that's not really like the focus here. Those aren't the big moments here. There is sort of like, yeah, just it turns more of the focus to a like lyrical side of things versus just, you know, showing off what she can do kind of a thing. And I think that's like, yeah, the element of artistry that we're picking up on, of like being intentional with those choices.
Right on. What else? What else do you guys, what are you looking forward to next from her? Do you have any favorite tracks? We could go around and talk about favorite tracks from the album.
I'll go first. I mean, I think so. First of all, yes, and I've warmed up to that at first, you know, and I like it. It's super effective in terms of fitness and any kind of curation. It's a really, really great song, and I think I wasn't as attentive to the lyrics at first, so it sounded like a continuation of the, you know, kind of house vibes that Beyonce has been capitalizing recently. Like it's got a real house quality. It definitely, whether intentionally or not, it winks back to Madonna's Vogue and other songs like that. The lyrics though are really awesome, and I actually pulled them because they're disarming, right? Like the context is like bright, ebullient, happy music, like really kind of introspective, almost dark, sad lyrics. And I thought it was really like beautiful, the juxtaposition. So the first verse, in case you haven't noticed, well, everybody's tired and healing from somebody or something we don't see just right. And I was like, oh, that's special, right? Like that's not what I'm expecting necessarily to hear at the start of a pop song that has this kind of production around it. So that's special. And then also my wife clued me to the fact of in the chorus when she says, you know, yes, and say that shit with your chest. It's like it's super assertive, right? It's not only confident, but it's assertive. It's almost like, really, what, you got a problem with that? Like getting up there. And I think one thing that's really awesome about Ariana Grande is there's an assertiveness to her music and lyrics. She's very that goes beyond confidence, and I think it plays to maybe the hip hop elements that influenced her and stuff. She's just really, she's sex positive. She's very unabashed. She's pretty fearless, and I think that's another reason that even for whether longtime fans or newcomers can kind of rally around her, because that assertiveness is contagious. And I think also that assertiveness plays really well. And again, we don't just do fitness, but in fitness, that assertiveness and empowerment is awesome because you get a twofer. You get the musical and the lyrical, and then combined, it gets you fired up.
Yeah, I think that your point stands in particular sort of for like the people who aren't familiar, I think maybe helps explain how she went from sort of like what you expect your typical sort of like teen pop audience to be to a wider mass appeal in that way. I think like even, you know, the album title being Eternal Sunshine as a reference to movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, like that's sort of like an offbeat reference for what you would assume is her primary fan base. But she has this like magnetism that like will bring people along with her based on what she's into. Like she has, I mean, for also lack of a better word, that like star power of it. But you know, I think she makes those sort of choices very intentionally, and it like really illuminates different parts of her personality.
And do you have a favorite track from this one, Claire?
Yeah, I have really been loving the We Can't Be Friends. I thought like the SNL performance of it was really great as well. I think like uniquely, this was something when I was just sort of scanning the new album and then past albums. She does really interesting intros. So I actually really love the like intro song too. That's called End of the World. And yeah, I think she uses that like in a really like unique way. And there's another one from her previous album that is also like the intro track that it just like features this huge run. And it's not always like, you know, it's not a like intro statement in that way. It does sort of like live on its own. But I think that is just sort of like part of her artistry and that she like uses in a more unique way, which I think is interesting.
Mike, favorite track?
I think my favorite track is Imperfect for You. Also Ariana's favorite track on the album. Also the last song that she wrote and recorded for the album, which is kind of cool because that one, like Sten said, it is a little bit different. It's got this kind of 60s trippy vibe to it. And I'm interested to see if like, okay, well, maybe does that mean that future music will be just as kind of trippy and not straight up 4 to the floor or what? But yeah, that one, I don't know. I gravitate towards that one for sure.
That one has kind of an unexpected, I don't know that it's technically dissonance, but the chord changes definitely are really striking. You know, she sings the chorus and it's one chord sequence and then it's like a half step up and she, you know, kind of echoes herself and cascades down. And that chord progression, I think, is really striking and interesting. And then I don't know if y'all heard, but there's castanets in that song. So that's really kooky and cool too, because it's almost like it gets into like a Spanish dance kind of vibe. I mean, I don't know my Spanish dances well enough to say which one, but I loved that. I am going to toss it back to you, Mike, though, because, you know, as our Feed Originals person who actually is an A&R person and works with recording musicians day in and day out and talks through recording songs and how they're recorded and stuff like that, you bring a really unique perspective on production, right? And so we were commenting that she produced all this really, you know, kind of on the fly, unexpectedly in a week or so with one producer, Max Martin. Do you have any thoughts about like what you're just hearing from a production standpoint? Because I always love hearing your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, she's worked with Max in the past, so there was obviously a comfort level there. And she also had a much heavier hand in the production and the arrangements on this album, like solo. Like she spent lots of time on her own in the studio. So it's just sort of a testament to how talented she is as an arranger. That's interesting. Now that I think about it, I'm wondering if she's going to start to do that for other artists. You know, I'd enjoy hearing Ariana's take on other artists' material. You know.
Definitely.
That's exciting. All part of the evolution, right? I think that's, you know, that's the kicker here is, you know, it's been 10 years since Yours Truly came out. And as you mentioned, Claire, you know, she started off on Broadway and Nickelodeon, and she has evolved, her audience has evolved. We've landed here, and, you know, there's a lot more to come. Wicked's coming out in November. You know, will she, you know, be working with, you know, supporting other artists in their endeavors? What will she do next, and how will she approach the next album, you know, after this time period? It'll be really interesting to see. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Inside Music Curation. We're the team at Feed Media Group. We're here once a month to talk all things music curation. So check us out at feedmediagroup.com. Follow us along on whatever channel you're watching this on, and we'll be back next month to talk more topics around music curation. Thank you, Claire, Mike, Stens, as always, for your expertise. And yeah, this is Ariana Grande. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.